Welcome to Shardlight Radio, the Argent Saga podcast, featuring interviews, card reviews, deck analysis, and much more. Shardlight Radio is your source to everything happening in the world of Argos. And we're back on Shardlight Radio. I'm your host, mrben, and on this special Friday edition of the podcast, I'm going to reveal 3 cards from the upcoming Argent Saga Booster Pack expansion, Ascension. This release comes out on March 26th. Make sure you give your local game store a call to ensure that they have those packs on the shelf for you on release day. Let's dive right into the cards. Today I have 2 commons and a rare to spoil, and I'm going to start with a 1-cost fire spell called Return from Ashes. This is a common, and it allows you to destroy a fire unit you control, and if you do, put into play a fire unit from your discard zone with cost less than the destroyed unit. The immediate place my thoughts go with this card is if you attack with a unit, then you play this 1-cost spell, destroy it, and you get a smaller unit that has quickness or that you can give quickness to via something like using the Corona Spirit, and you essentially have that waterfall effect happening with your board. So you swing with your big guys, you kill a guy, you get another slightly smaller guy, swing with him, kill that guy, and you could do this a few times throughout the turn. There are other effects within Fire that are kind of similar to this, so building your deck around the idea that you're going to look for a turn where you can waterfall and attack with your whole board, kill some things off, replace them with smaller units, and attack again. And essentially, rather than having one big burst of damage from an unexpected spell or a solitary quickness unit, you have this series of units attacking for a burst that otherwise would not be possible. Is this card going to see competitive play? Well, thus far in Argent Saga, this kind of waterfall idea has not really seen much play. It doesn't mean it never will. It certainly has worked out in other card games historically, so I think this strategy is valid. But at this point, given what we've seen out of Ascension and what we already know about the card pool, I'm not sure that this is going to have a home in top tier tournament level decks. Now, playing around the kitchen table with your buddies on a Friday night over beers, I think this card is totally viable. This isn't garbage, but it is a 1-cost and therefore somewhat low power level spell that has kind of a big drawback in order to maybe sneak an extra unit into play. I mean, on some level, you could use this card, pay 1, sacrifice a 6-drop, and get 6 Shardlight worth of unit in play without having to pay that 6 Shardlight. So the potential upside is certainly there, but do you want to be structuring your entire deck strategy around killing your own things to be able to play more things? I mean, maybe you do, but I don't think you want to do it just for this card. Right now, I think this card has some definite utility, but I don't see a deck that it's going to immediately slot into. I think the type of deck archetype that would take real advantage of this card is not something that we've seen in high-level play, and it's not something that I've even seen much success with in my casual play group on Friday nights. All right, the next card I want to talk about is a air spell. This is the rare card that I have today. It is a 4-cost card called Cloud Sea Preparation. Add target Sky Raider and target airship unit from your discard zone to your hand. If you've played 2 or more other cards this turn, you may put them into play instead. It's not gonna be ideal to pay 4 to add 2 cards to your hand. Yeah, there will be times where your back's against the wall, your hand has been depleted, you have no options, and this could bail you out. This could give you maybe one more thing to do this turn. I mean, if we're assuming late game, you've got 10 Shardlight, you play this, that's basically half of what your available resources. Maybe you can play both of the cards that you get out of the KO pile with this, or maybe you can only play one and then have another option for next turn. But I think anytime you're playing this to put a Sky Raider and an airship from the KO pile, from the discard zone into your hand, that is a move of desperation. That is I'm gonna lose this game if I don't get something on board. The real upside for playing this card is going to be if you've played 2 or more cards this turn, you may put them into play instead. Paying 4 to get potentially 12 Shardlight worth of value could be huge. I mean, if you get 2 6-drops, you're way underpaying for what you get. Now, you do have to play some other cards this turn, but this only costs 4. So you could throw out a couple of little guys, whatever. There are a lot of good, playable, cheap options within air. And if you're mixing this in with other elements, there could be additional good, cheap, playable options. It's not that hard to slot 2 plays into a turn and have 4 Shardlight left over to be able to play Cloud Seep Preparation. But I don't think you ever want to play this naked. You don't ever want to play this to put cards in your hand. Almost all situations, you're going to want to play this to put cards into play. That brings me to the other kind of restriction on this card. You get 1 Sky Raider and you get 1 airship. How many Sky Raiders and airships are going to make big, impactful differences? Let's do a thought experiment here. The earliest you're going to want to play this card is probably turn 6. And I say that because you want to play 2 other cards first. So let's assume you have a 1 cost something, a 1 cost something, then into Cloud Seep Preparation, and you get 2 units into play. So this really is probably a more expensive card than its printed cost would lead you to believe. Because if you look at this and go 2 units, that seems like a pretty decent deal. But really, the optimal line for this card is to get those units into play, which means you're almost certainly not going to be playing this on turn 4. I mean, yeah, there are some 0 cost options, and there are some ways that you can play something and then ready those same shards within air. So that does make some sense. It would be possible that you could play some things, ready some shards, and then play this earlier. But really, I think we're talking about a card that's going to be played probably turn 5, 6, or later in the game. And that brings me to the kind of restriction that's on it. Again, the Sky Raider airship restriction. This doesn't let you get whatever. So you're going to want to have impactful cards. Obviously, you don't want to play a 4-cost spell that required some setup to be able to get these units in play and then put 2 2-drops into play. No. This is going to be ideally targeting bigger bodies. Now, if you're running a pure green deck, and I don't think you would run this card in a deck where Kite isn't your spirit. I think this is a card that appeals to a mono green strategy, both through the restriction of the unit type that it's allowed to target, but also kind of the way that it plays. If Kite is your spirit, you're limited to only 8 green cards unless you also have an air champion. And I think using Kite early makes some of those cards that you discard when you're bouncing things with Kite be those big 6 and 7 drop airships. And then for 4 Shardlight, you could potentially put like Knost into play along with something else. That could be a huge turn. That could be really big, but kind of similar to the other card that I talked about today, this card really does require you to build your deck kind of around it. If I'm drafting, I'm not sure I would put this card into my draft deck, for instance. I mean, it depends on what the rest of the draft looks like and if I'm able to target enough Sky Raiders and airships to make it worthwhile. But there is a real potential here that your deck just doesn't draw the way you want it to, and now all of a sudden you're looking at my only option is to pay this 4 cost and put an airship without the Sky Raider? No. I really think this is a card that is designed to buttress mono air strategies and make the mono air decks significantly better, whereas it's probably not going to be splashable. Maybe if you go air with a different spirit, but then you sort of lose the ability to seed your discard zone with the cards that this card would probably want to target. My conclusion on this is that this is a card that really wants to encourage you to play mono air. And if we look at tournament results from basically the beginning of the game on, mono strategies have not historically seen a lot of success. Having splashes of other colors seems to be the way all the top tier competitive decks work, which makes me think that this rare might not see play at high level. I don't think it's a bad card, but it asks a lot from you, both in terms of how you need to play it, but also in terms of how you build your deck to make sure you get value out of it. And that does box you into a corner a little bit. If you're running enough Sky Raiders and airships, and you're able to get the things you want in your KO pile, and you're able to play some early units on that same turn, or early cards on that same turn to be able to activate, it's just a lot. I have a feeling that when this card does hit the table, there's going to be a lot of times where you're not getting full value out of it because there are a lot of boxes you have to check in order to get full value out of it. And that brings me to the final card that I have to reveal today. This is a 10 cost water spell, Instacast. 10 cost Instacast water spell called Leviathan's Fury. Just with that information, doesn't feel great to start off. However, this card does get its cost reduced by 1 for each face-up tower you control. And the effect that it has is it returns all units your opponent controls to their owner's hand. Both of those lines of text are very valid. Let's start with the first one. Cost 1 less to play for each of your face-up towers. So you have a total of 5 towers that could potentially reduce the cost of the spell to 5 Shardlight. Even if you reduce it to 5 Shardlight, is it a good value? Well, we'll touch on that in a second. What I want to talk about first is the reduction of cost. One way to look at that is in order to get the cost reduced down to 5, that means you're losing the game. That means all your towers are face up and you're clearly behind because your towers are broken, face up, whatever. Except that we've already seen some cards in the Ascension expansion revealed that allow water to have the ability to flip towers face up or face down, like specific cards that give you that ability. So if you're building a deck around the idea of, I want to reveal this information to my opponent and then get a benefit out of it, that seems like it makes sense. And I think we can draw a pretty direct line from this kind of, I guess the cost of the card is almost information. You're exchanging information for an effect. One of the 2 water champions that we have right now is Jillian, and that's exactly what she does. You reveal your hand, you get to draw some extra cards. So giving water the ability to now reveal, turn face up their towers to get a little bit of extra value really fits just so well with what that element is doing already. It makes a lot of sense. It's a logical outgrowth of what they've done so far. Now, to analyze the actual effect of this card, return all units your opponent controls to their owner's hand. To make this real simple, let's assume we have 5 face-up towers and we play this. We're looking at a 5 cost Shards of Winter that only affects the other side of the board. It doesn't target and blow up all of our units. That could be huge. That could be a game-winning play. I get rid of all your dudes, and then I just get to attack with impunity, and there's nothing you can do about it. Well, I mean, instacast spells, but there's no board. I can wipe your board. Now, this card is clearly worse than, say, Chronostasis, which costs 1 more. So Chronostasis is 6, Shards of Winter is 4, Leviathan's Fury, if you get the full cost reduction, is 5. Chronostasis takes the units that are in play and puts them on the bottom of their owner's decks, but it hits both sides of the board. That is definitely better in terms of an answer. If there's a dangerous unit in play, particularly if it has an appear ability, oh my goodness, putting it back in your opponent's hand doesn't really solve that problem. Now, if you're putting it back into their hand and you're attacking for the win right away, doesn't matter. Who cares if they play it again? I think comparing this to both Shards and Chronostasis, it fits right into that overall power level trajectory. Shards exhausts all the other units on the board, which kind of allows you to push through attacks in the same way that Leviathan's Fury does. Fury will remove those units from the board. Now, it does put them in hand. It doesn't put them on the bottom of the deck like Chronostasis does, but it doesn't hit your side of the board like Chronostasis does. So really, I think this is a pretty decent card. Now, if I'm being honest, I would have preferred to just see this be a 5-cost spell and not have the cost reduction mechanic at all. Like, get rid of that entirely. But I suspect there's a reason why they wanted it costed so highly initially. Give you an avenue to reduce it in cost. And if you do get the full cost reduction, then I think it falls right in line with a lot of these other heavy late game water board control options. And I do really like this card. I think it's likely to see play. Relying on that cost reduction does seem a little tough. It does make it seem like maybe this is a worse option for your deck than Chronostasis or Shards. But as we see more effects or see more cards for water that give us ways to manipulate our towers and potentially turn them face up at will, if we can get this cost reduction online, then this is a completely fine option to slot in next to your other, heavy, hit everything on the board type control spells. This does answer Ayakuma Juggernaut, and that is sort of the question that any good removal spell, you got to ask, does this deal with Juggernaut? And if it does, then we can keep talking. If it doesn't, that's fine. I'll move on to something that does. All right, well, that's all the cards that I had to reveal for the upcoming Ascension expansion today. Remember, that releases on March 26th. And until next time, go win some games. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Shardlight Radio. Remember to follow us on Facebook. If you like the show and want to support what we're doing, join us at patreon.com/thebuildphase to find out how. Special thanks to Ben Ruegg for our fantastic new theme music, and until next time, go win some games.